It's our good pal Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. All right, go ahead, run a lap, come back. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Buddy, if I had to run a lap, I might pass out.
Yeah, we don't want that, buddy. Our show would get
No.
significantly worse. How are things?
Good, man. Very good. Again, sorry about the timing of everything. It's the irony
Cooper's
is that
fault.
today, well, it's not Coop's fault today.
Whose fault?
I wanted to talk to Rob Zettler because I'm working on this story on Charles Edouard Dastou, who
easy for you to say.
We anticipate he'll make his NHL debut tomorrow. Not a given. Nothing's set in stone, but we kind of feel it's trending that way. But it's a great story on a guy that I'm telling you, Jay, when people read this story, they're going to root for this kid. He's got a great backstory. These are the kind of stories that I love being able to report on and write on. I was waiting on Rob Zettler to talk to him about him. And I actually never even did talk to Zetz. He was in a meeting, so I was like, I got to go. I've made Jay wait too long, so I got to go.
lightninginsider.com, guys and gals. Make sure you sign up today. Use that promo code JNC, get $10 off, not just today, but every subsequent season. So why are we seeing this guy?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, Max Crozier is still out. Crozier's a righty. Dastou is a lefty, so it's not exactly matching up. But, look, they were very high on him in training camp. He got a couple of games in and, really showed of himself. Like, here's a guy who had never even signed an NHL contract before, right? He was undrafted coming out of junior, and the only contract he signed was an AHL two-way deal. So it was an AHL ECHL deal, and he kind of split a couple of years between then. So they just want to, I think you have to find out. You have to have answers, right? Just like at some point, I'm pretty sure we'll see Wojtek Stachowiak up, right? Because you have to have answers to questions of what you saw in preseason, and can that carry over into the NHL against different looking lineups? So I think that's what a lot of this is. He went down to Syracuse, played 4 games for the Crunch, and was really good down there. He's the kind of player, you look at his offensive numbers. I mean, he once scored like 20-plus goals in the ECHL, right? For a defenseman, obviously, that's a high number. Yeah. So he's been kind of labeled, some ways unfairly, as a offensive defenseman only. But you look at his numbers, and in talking to him today and in talking a little bit to John Cooper about him, he's not just an offensive guy. Yeah, the numbers are there, but, plus minus isn't the end all be all, but you look at his plus minus numbers, they're really good everywhere he's been. He was even telling me today that his partner last year played in the Swedish Elite League, were among the tops in plus minus in the Swedish Elite League. So he's not just an offensive guy. So I think that you just want to be able to get a feel for, he's 27 years old. So he's not, a 21, 22-year-old. So he's a little bit advanced in his pro career. But I think you just have to find out about guys. And I think this is an opportunity with Crozier's injury. Obviously, the team's in a little bit of a funk to start the season, just to see where he fits in and if he fits in.
We got a question here from Nick. Should only be a matter of time until we see Pelletier. 3-year deal means he must be in our future plans, right? Dominic James looks like a player too.
Yeah, again, these were the questions we had in training camp, right? Who was going to earn those opportunities out of camp? And certainly Pelletier was in that conversation, and Dominic James forced his way into that conversation. Again, a player in James we didn't really know much about. Played 3 years at Minnesota Duluth, missed a year because of injury to his shoulder that he had his junior year. But basically signed in the middle of camp and was here until the end. And the preseason games that he played, you could see the attributes that he has outside of the speed, the hockey sense, the understanding how to make plays. And he's continued that. He's got 3 goals in 4 games for Syracuse. He's got points in all 4 games. He had the overtime winner against Hershey in game number 2 to start the season. And yeah, Pelletier he's here on a 3-year deal. So it's not just a now situation. Remember, his is a 2-way deal this year. It's a 1-way deal, the final 2 years of that contract. So yeah, there's an investment there in Pelletier as well. That eventually, depending on how injuries shake out, that, we'll probably see both those guys at some point, at least get a chance to see what they look like in a Lightning uniform.
I don't know if this is a question angled towards Julien Brisebois or John Cooper, but do the Lightning need to be a little bit more cutthroat maybe that's too strong of a word, but do they need to be a little bit more stern this season going forward on who plays and how much they play? Because I feel like there was the one thing, and I get it because they're up and they're butted up against the salary cap so much the last couple of years, but I think this team, it would do some good if there was some consequences for their actions or something where if you're not getting the job done, there's other people that can come in and do said job. What say you?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at that. The
Mhm.
first is in years past, you're right. They haven't had the cap room and they haven't had the depth. Like there was no push, right? So you didn't really have the opportunity to do that. And even if you did, you didn't have the cap space to do it. I mean, how many games last year and the year before did they basically only carry 20 guys on the roster because they had to? Right, because the salary cap situation forced them into making those decisions on their roster and the personnel. I think this year, I think they do have the depth, and more importantly, they have a little bit of cap flexibility. Like you look at any of the cap sites, like you're used to seeing the lighting right near the top, if not at the top of available cap space, as in the less available cap space. They're usually at the top. They're a little bit further down this year. The cap going up certainly helps. You look at some of the guys that are on like contracts that are under $1 million cap hit. I mean, those certainly kind of help, give you this kind of flexibility. So they have that flexibility this time around. And I think the one thing that preseason showed us outside of, wanting to be a quote unquote tougher team, I think it showed that some of the depth is there, right? Dominic James, we just talked about him, kind of came out of nowhere and really made a name for himself in camp. And, the signing of Pelletier and Dylan Duke, we didn't really talk much about Dylan Duke in preseason. Declan Carlisle on the back end, a left-hand shot defenseman, showed that he's on the cusp of being NHL ready, if he's not already, sort of the same path as Max Crozier took to get to the NHL. So, I think in like to answer the question, I think you have the ability this year. But the thing is like you're not benching a Brandon Hagel. You're not benching a Nikita Kucherov, if they make mistakes. It's just you can take some ice time away a little bit. But, the guys that you're going to bring up or, if a guy like Gonsalves can't handle a top six role on a regular basis. And, we don't even know what the things are going to look like when Nick Paul does come back, which, should be within the next couple of weeks or so. He has been skating as he comes back from a wrist injury. But yeah, I think that the flexibility opportunities are there to maybe see some of these guys that maybe in the years past you couldn't even afford to get a look at some of these guys.
You mentioned the young kid playing on defense. So how would you think who's going to play tomorrow night in your best guesstimation?
If I were to guess, I think they go 7-11 tomorrow. That's just kind of reading between the lines because obviously, and I'm sure we'll get into the Conor Geekie situation. He was sent to Syracuse. The Crunch play tonight. So in theory, you could bring Geekie back up ahead of tomorrow's game. That's certainly a possibility. But looking at what they have right now, they've only got 12 healthy forwards on their roster because Zemgus Girgensons has been practicing. But, John Cooper indicated the weekend might be an opportunity for him to get back in the lineup. So I don't think that's going to be tomorrow. So that just kind of gives me the indication that maybe you go 7-11 and you sit out either Curtis Douglas or Jack Finley and then let, the fourth line be the fourth line. And you give Destu an opportunity because he was running a little bit of the second power play today. Darren Radish started out as the point guy on the power play, but Destu took over some opportunities as well. So everything tells me that Destu is playing tomorrow without being told that Destu is playing tomorrow.
All right, let's get into the Conor Geekie thing. I'm so bullish on this kid. I'm worried about his development because you see this in sports sometimes and you see the guys and they do it with TLC and tender loving care. And let's not overwhelm them. Let's do this. And then you never see the guy be the guy you can be. And I know he's a young player, but man, when the other guys aren't necessarily blowing your socks off with what they're doing, this team hasn't really shown much through the first couple of games as far as being able to win and to be able to score goals. And what do you make of the Conor Geekie situation deeper than what they've said? And I get it. He's 21. He's one of the guys that's a numbers thing. He can be sent down, not having to pass the waivers. But reading in between the lines, Double E, is there something that he's not doing? Is there some like? Are you worried at all about his development at all? I mean, take off your optimistic hat just a little bit here and vibe with me here because you're always a lot more level-headed about these things than I am. But I feel like he brings something to the table, brother, that nobody else does. And this team, I just feel like they're missing. We this is what I love about using soccer to analyze other sports. They talk about expression and they talk about being able to show your personality and to just be able to influence the games in different ways where it's deeper than just scoring goals. I feel like Conor Geekie, when he gets the opportunities in a long form, we really see that. When he shoots the puck, he can bring something to the table that we don't see from a lot of different guys. What do you make of his whole decision of him going down? And also, when could we see him back up?
You'll see him back up sooner rather than later. This is not a demotion in the sense that he's not playing well. Like I don't think, you look at the way he played in the first 6 games, he's not any better or any worse than anybody else, right? Like, so this is not he's playing terribly, we better get him down to the minors. I don't view it that way. And I
don't either. Sorry to cut you off. I don't either. But I think about it as much as we try to say he's a professional, he's got to like. It affects you, man. Like he's a human being at the end of the day, dude. Like you're telling everybody your brother's in the league. Like, yeah, as much as people say in the long run, it'll be good for him. I don't necessarily agree with that with everybody. Like if you're trying to make up the gap to Florida, if you're trying to change the way that your team plays and change your identity, like I'm sticking with him. Like I'm sticking with a guy like Conor Geekie and going through some of the warts because he can bring some other things that people don't. Like we've seen this in the past too with other players where, and then the guy moves on and then he flourishes somewhere else because everybody tries to be so cautious with these young players. I don't know how often you really see guys get burned out because if they weren't good enough, they're probably not going to be good regardless if they're playing at 20, 21, or 25.
Yeah. And again, this is not a demotion based necessarily on performance, right? The one thing when Coop was talking about it yesterday that, you try and read between the lines outside of as you mentioned, he's the only guy that doesn't require waivers to be sent back down and you want to open up a roster spot. And that's certainly part of it. And Coop indicated that. But the one thing that I took out of it was he said right now, Conor Geekie needs to play more to what his skill set demands. And for a couple of games, he was 4th line center. I think we can agree Conor Geekie is not a 4th line center.
No.
Right? So what is the best thing for him at this moment, not a week from now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, is to get him into situations where he's playing some minutes. Get him into being a top 6 guy, which he's probably going to be once he starts to really get closer to the ceiling of his development progress. And so I view it as that. And the rules have changed this year, the new CBA, a couple of things that were negotiated for the CBA that kicks in next year actually started this year. One of them is there's no more paper transactions for sending a guy to the American Hockey League. If you send a guy to the American Hockey League, he has to play a game there before you can bring him up. So that's what I'm saying. Syracuse plays tonight, so it's not outside the realm that Geekie gets called up tomorrow. Right. And, everything I just talked about with the 12 healthy forwards, that changes everything, right? So we'll see what tomorrow brings in terms of Conor Geekie. But, like, he will as a 21-year-old, and he did it last year. He thrived. Once he figured out how to handle it, right? And sometimes you do these things to see how players handle it. Once he figured out how to handle it, he thrived, and Syracuse came back, and I think we can all admit he was a different player when he was called back up at the end of the year, right? So that's what I'm saying. I'm not privy to the conversations, obviously, but I bet the conversations with Conor kind of went a little bit like that. Look, we want you to play some heavy minutes right now, whether it's one game, whether it's through the weekend, and this is not even a 3-day weekend for Syracuse. They play tonight. I think they play Saturday and they'll play again to Wednesday. So this is kind of a light schedule for the crunch right now. So you get him into a game, or you get him into 2 games and then you bring him back up before heading to Nashville, whatever it is. I think that those conversations with him were, look, we want you to play some minutes. And right now we don't have a top 6 spot yet. doesn't mean there won't be there. Again, I think the questions are still out there about Gonsalves as a top 6. He showed it in the second half of last year, but I think most of the top 6 this year has not performed like we want to see the top 6 on this team perform, and he
He's
is
the
part
guy.
of that top 6.
He's
right?
the guy
So
because you're not
yeah,
taking Point, Gensel, Kucherov, Cirelli, and Hagel.
exactly,
And I get that. So
exactly.
is it more of you got to see this from Gage and see if he can do it in the first quarter, first half of the season to see if he can
Yeah,
replicate what he did in the second half, and then when he
yeah.
doesn't, you go with Geekie then?
The other thing is too, like he played the first 2 games of the road trip at fourth line center Geekie we're talking about, but with Kucherov out Friday and Saturday, Geekie was a top 6 guy, right? Like he moved into a top 6. So that more than anything will tell you what they think of him and where they think he can be. So that's why, like, you look at that and you take the comment from Coop yesterday talking about skill set, and roles that are more suited to a skill set. You kind of get a little window into the thinking of what the bigger picture at play is with Conor Geekie. And I don't think that, they're not stunting his growth. The development curve is still on the way up, right? This is not something, to kind of get too worked up over, although I understand it because they haven't had a prospect.
I'm getting worked up.
They have not had a prospect rank as high as Conor Geekie, in a number of years. Obviously, the lack of draft picks have had it, and the Isaac Howard situation didn't work out, and he ends up moving on. But they haven't had somebody like this come up through their system, even though he wasn't drafted by him, with this sort of pedigree next to his name.
Yeah, and I think it's impossible, right? It's impossible to know if they're stunning his growth, but I want them to give more opportunities to young guys. I want them to give more opportunities to upset the apple cart. Like I feel like we're trying to go down the same road with the same type of recipe, and it's just a different team. It's a different personality altogether. What has been the big bugaboo for this team? You think the first couple of games they just seem to really be struggling to kind of just put it all together.
Yeah, they look slow and out of sync.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've had multiple stretches in games, 10, 15, 18 minutes without a shot on goal is a little concerning. It's not a one-game thing, right? It's been something that's happened a couple of times. I think the preseason plays into this a little bit, although we're kind of getting past that point right now. But, the regulars didn't play in the preseason. Right, Victor Hedman played 20 minutes. Brandon Hagel played a game in 8 minutes. Right, they didn't play together as a unit because of the whole situation that went on with the Panthers, and that last game was supposed to be their top guys playing together for the first time to get ready for the start of the regular season. That didn't happen. So I feel that they kind of got caught up in the way that the preseason ended and have knocked them out of sync. Now, having said that, you are 6 games in. It's time to stop using that as an excuse and go out and play. And, the one thing, again, reading between lines of what coaches say, when Coop talked about the practice designed yesterday, and a little bit of it was that way today, but more so yesterday, pace and I forget the other word he used, but you heard pace a couple of times come out of him. They're not playing the game fast. Part of that is execution. I mean, there's been plenty of times where like, man, how did he not make that pass? How did he not connect on that pass? And when you connect on those passes, you do look faster. Right. So it's the pace and speed of execution that is lacking on this team right now, and the decision making. I mean, the Kucherov pass on the power play when they're down a goal in the third period against the Devils, it crushed them. Right, Victor Hedman not clearing the puck out on the penalty kill. Rather than making the right play, he tried to make a risky play. And it burned him, and it probably ended up costing them a point in that game against Washington. So to me, it's the pace and execution, and it's the decision-making. That's still preseason decision-making. You got to be in regular season, hell, even playoff decision-making, where you got to take risk out of your game. You go back to that Washington game, you're up 2-1 in the third period. You don't have to score another goal as long as you don't give one up. Right. So you have the lead in the third. So that's a mentality thing that they kind of have to get back into their system a little bit, is making the smart reads, playing winning hockey. They have not played a winning style of hockey really through six games of the season. So, this couple of days off here, 2 days off, and then 2 days of good hard practices, hopefully kind of resets things and gets them ready for what's going to be a little bit of a tough stretch coming up.
Do you fall into the fact that, do you fall into the habit of thinking like, hey, this worked with one group 5 years ago, and do you run the risk of not trying to reinvent yourself? And I'm not saying trying to recreate the wheel, but do you? And the case in point was the third line. Just get another third line, everything will be fine, right? Like, it's not always like that. But do you feel like the team has been able to find the last 2 or 3 years their identity throughout the season? Because I feel like even last year, like, they played well, the defense was better, but there's also some other things. Like, when you look at it, they had some games where they gave up a ton of goals. You saw what they did in the postseason. Because at the end of the day, this team is only going to be judged by what happens in the playoffs. Like, what would you say this team's identity is right now?
Well, that's part of it. They don't have one right now.
Yeah.
And that's where I say the preseason kind of mess with their heads a little bit, because they want to have this persona that their teams are not going to push them around. Right. Mm-hmm. Because it's what we talked about a little bit.
That's what they were focused on
coming out of the preseason. And certainly those last few games were trying to create that part of their identity, which is not their strength. And it's not going to be their strength, but they want it to be a part of who they are. So that's why I think things kind of got scrambled at the end of preseason, because it kind of changed their plans. Right. It kind of, like, you don't call up all those guys from Syracuse without a reason, right? And it wasn't like everybody thinks, oh, they're trying to goon it up. Yeah, that was part of the thinking, especially with Sabourin and Roman Schmidt come up. But Dastu's not that kind of a player. Dylan Duke's not that kind of a player. Stahoviak's not that kind of a player. Peltier, like, none of these guys are like goons, quote unquote. Yeah. And certainly Sabourin was brought up, but so it kind of took them out of their game plan, and they've kind of scrambled to try and get it all back together. They thought and they felt that they could rely on, because it is a lot of the same players from last year. There is a lot of the same chemistry. A lot of the line combinations were the same to start the year as they were to end the year last year. But, like, it doesn't always work that way. Like, think about the year where Nikita Kucherov, Andre Palat, and Tyler Johnson first played together. By far the best line in hockey. They had a nickname, a triplets. Their shirts were made up with them, everything, and they were so good. They were just on the same page. And he came back the next year, and it wasn't the same. The chemistry wasn't the same, but they weren't in sync the same way. So you can't rely on last year. Yeah, it's great to have that familiarity, but you have to build it this year. You can't just rely on it. And so I think that's part of this as well, is that maybe they are relying too much on the numbers that they had last year, because their overall numbers were really good. Right, in terms of offense and defense and all the numbers that you want to add up, they were all pretty good. So I think they kind of relied on that too much, and now you're realizing, okay, we have to. And things are different. Right, Jeff Blashill's not here anymore, so it's a little bit of a new system they're kind of implementing. Sometimes it takes a little bit to kind of get used to some of the new details. I mean, when I talked to Yanni Gord yesterday, he was fantastic. And that's up on the website if people want to read more of what Yanni Gord had to say. But basically said you have to focus on the small details of the game. And the money quote was, every game is like a giant puzzle, and you have to find the small pieces that all fit together. Right? So you can kind of see where the mindset is in trying to bring everybody together on the same page, even though a lot of the players ended the season together with this team last year.
Before I let you go, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but the whole thing with Mikhail Sergachev and what he said on that Russian podcast about Blashill and the defensive structure. Did we ever talk about? I don't know if we ever talked about that.
We didn't bring it up. No,
I don't know. I mean, because it was happening I think it was in the off season. But, like, what do you make of that? I mean, we hear that a lot, of course, up in the press box with some of the people that we're hanging out with as far as the defensive structure. But, like, what do you make of that whole thing? And do you buy into the big kind of defensive change as far as what type of defensive structure they played with after they were so successful with those 3 straight runs to the Stanley Cup final?
I do a little bit. Like, when you have success the way that they did and play in a certain way, and sometimes you have to fit your system to the personnel, and sometimes the personnel has to fit the system. I felt with the changes that were made, it does lend itself to criticism, because if you do have success, why are you changing it? And why are you changing it in the grand scheme of things drastically, right? Like from a drastic standpoint, because that was a drastic change in the way that they played defense, especially how they set up in their own zone. I still think they dropped too deep, right? And again, I think they're trying, like you kind of watch the practices and kind of what they're working on. I think they are trying to get guys a little bit further out to cover the points a little bit better, to take away. Time and space is everything in this game. It's such a fast-paced game. If you give the skilled players in this league time and space to burn you, there's a good chance at some point they're going to burn you.
Right.
And I think that's what happened in the playoffs last year against the Panthers, because they were so good, especially that third line that the Panthers had. They just ate the Lightning's breakfast throughout that entire 5-game series. So I think there is something to that in terms of why are you changing something that we had so much success for? And when you do that, like, it's hard to get the players to totally buy into.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the biggest thing. You have to show the players why you're changing. And I think with Sergachev's comments there, I think there was a hesitancy on a lot of guys to buy in, because wait a second, we had success with A. Why are you making me change to B now? So, I think there's some merit to what Mikhail Sergachev had to say for sure.
E, what do you have up on lightninginsider.com right now, buddy? Let them know.
Yeah. Like I said, there's some great comments from Yanni Gord yesterday. Also, some of the insight into Conor Geekie, sending him down to Syracuse. And I asked Coop yesterday about the shots. And so that stuff is kind of up there. And again, I got to start working on this Dastu story, man. I'm telling you, it's an emotional tearjerker. It's the story about who his greatest supporter was. And, I'll tease it with this. He wears a necklace with a ring on it. And that's a big part of a promise he made to get to the NHL. And he's one step shy of it right now. And you're going to want to cheer for Charles-Edouard Dastu after reading this story. So that'll be up probably later tonight. That'll be posted up. So look for that. Certainly, if not by tonight, certainly by, first thing in the morning.
Charles-Edouard Dastu, or as I like to call him, Seti. Will be the first Seti since Seti Paquette.
He said we can call him Charlie, but Charles-Edouard sounds so much better, doesn't it?
Charles-Edouard.
It just sounds so much better. I'm not going to call him Charlie. I'm going to call him Charles-Edouard.
Charles-Edouard. That would have been a Ron Diaz favorite. Charles-Edouard. Erik Erlendsson. Follow him on Twitter /X. Erik_Erlendsson. That's a K, not a C. 2 S's after the D. lightninginsider.com. Sign up with the promo code JNZ, get $10 off, not just this year, but every recurring season after that. Double E, thank you, buddy. Appreciate you rushing home. I won't be there tomorrow. I got practice, but I'll see you on Saturday night, my friend. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. And hopefully next Wednesday we'll have a better timing.
We'll see. Damn.
The team's not practicing.
You got that right. Thanks, pal. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Jay.
All right.